Welcome back, everybody. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And today, Jeff, may I say, you're looking much better than usual. I mean, just you usually, but today you don't look half bad.
Why, thank you, Joe. And it's nearly impossible to detect your problem. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Today we're talking about the art of the compliment, and this follows on our previous episodes, the art of the insult, and we didn't do that one. The
No, we
art,
didn't do that one.
the
Possible. It's a possible. We just did that one, actually.
the art of the apology, and
Yes.
and the art of the thank you. So and that was a demonstration of what not to do.
The left-handed compliment, so to speak.
Yes. Why yeah, you don't look nearly as bad as usual.
What have you done? You look positively lifelike.
Yeah. So before we get started, Jeff, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a bourbon it's from a company called Rabbit Hole, and it's called Derringer, Dareриnger, and it's a straight bourbon whiskey.
Yeah. I see what they did there.
Yeah, it's extremely clever. But it's a straight bourbon whiskey aged in sherry casks, so it has an interesting finish. It's sweet, but it's got I'm not sure how to identify the note in it. It sits higher in my sinus than the usual bourbon
Interesting
note does. So
I'll have to try that sometime. I would think with a name like Derringer, you'd have to drink it as 2 shots. Unless it was a single shot,
Right. Well, you have to drink them one right after another.
Yeah, so. Exactly.
And what do you've got?
I have a incredible disappearing glass, a pickle whiskey sour.
Okay.
So this is
we got it rimmed with paprika or something?
Rimmed with Old Bay seasoning.
Okay.
Using bullet rye whiskey and spicy pickle juice and lemon juice.
Interesting.
It's very interesting. I like it quite a bit. Spicy pickle juice, courtesy of our friend Galen, who also gave me the recipe. Yeah, I like it quite a bit. It's unusual. You wouldn't think it would go together, but yeah, it's there's a spiciness both from the Old Bay and spicy pickle juice. It works well with the rye. The lemon juice cuts through that a bit. It's sounds odd, but it really works.
It's interesting. You'll have to fix me one next time.
Yeah.
So cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
So we demonstrated the sort of left-handed compliment, the backhanded compliment, where you say something very nice that's actually really awful. Something.
I remember I was once doing a class on courtesy, and I started it with, "All right, all you bums, listen up." And it was meant to be a joke, and they all stared at me like, "What?"
Did I get your attention?
It was a joke. You're allowed to have a joke. So, yeah, those were definitely the left-hand extreme versions of the left.
Well, and I think the best or worst left-handed compliment that was ever given to me was a friend of ours. We both know Tadashi. I hadn't seen him in several years, and he showed back up at a gathering we were at, and I said, "Well, Mike," his name is Mike Parker, and I said, "Mike, you long time no see." And he turned to me and he looked me up and down, said, Well, you're looking very prosperous.
Wow.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine there are a few things we could say to him. Someone once told me, as I came off the armored combat field, oh, I'm thank you for setting such an example of how to be gracious in retirement. It's like, excuse me, excuse me. I'm not done yet. Why don't we take this out on the field and discuss it further? Yeah, oh, you're not half bad for an old guy, you know.
Oh, you recounted a story that I always remember and enjoyed when someone who said, "Boy, I hope I'm half as good as you are when I'm your age."
Yes, to which I replied, you should be able to. You're half as good as I am now. So we haven't really discussed the retort.
No,
and I think
that's not really the place for this.
No, and being able to give a good retort is a useful skill, but it's also fraught because
Yes.
people will try to one up each other. And I would rather, and it can get really nasty eventually, I would rather try to one up each other, compliment, which leads us back into complimenting. I've read and heard that people are encouraged when complimenting children to compliment their effort more than their gifts. So instead of saying, looking at a kid's artwork, you're so talented, say, I can see that you put a lot of effort into it and it really shows, and you should keep up the good work, because you're encouraging the effort, not the gift. And a coworker of mine, colleague of mine, once said that he taught his children to be proud of what they accomplished, not of what they were born with that they had nothing to do with, to be proud of what they accomplished. And I think that a compliment about what people accomplish is more meaningful and also less likely to get you in trouble.
Well, there's certainly lately been an attitude of with I don't want to link it directly to the Me Too sort of movement, but a feminism teaches us that don't say, hey, your eyes are your eyes are beautiful, or something that make someone uncomfortable.
Well, something that objectifies somebody. So,
okay.
I was in a grocery store some years ago, and there was a fellow there who was impeccably dressed. You could see the effort that he had put into putting his suit and tie and scarf and pocket silk and hat and all of that together, accessories, the cufflinks. It was beautifully done. And I turned to him and I said, sir, you are incredibly well put together. Thank you. And I thanked him for what he was doing. And this is, I had seen something, a story about a man who always dressed this way. And they asked him why, and he said, the world can be such an ugly place. Because I have the capacity to do this, the capability of doing this, I want to bring a sense of beauty into the world whenever I can. And it seemed to me that this fellow was doing exactly that, and I appreciated it. It was really good to see. But I didn't compliment him on looking good. I didn't say, oh, like hey, you'd be prettier if you smiled, which is
not a compliment.
No. Or you look hot, or hey baby, or these are not, catcalling is not a compliment. Hey, I'm just trying to compliment you. No, you aren't. That's not a compliment. if the proper response to a compliment is thank you, then the compliment has to be something that somebody would actually thank you for
Well,
saying.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So my I don't want to say strategy because it's not a strategy. What I've come to is, I mean, years ago, I might have said to a woman, "You have lovely hair,"
Mm-hmm.
and that's all. Just the fact that I'm struck by the color or
Mm-hmm.
the way it's worn or whatever. I wouldn't do that now.
What would you
Um,
say?
well, I'd probably, if that was all that struck me, I probably wouldn't say anything. Um, I'm if I'm not going to compliment someone unless I see it as a choice or an effort they have made. Like you said, an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Now I can compliment their clothing or their choice of clothing or the fact that they have put together an interesting and striking ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's fair game if it's sincere.
Well, I have complimented people, men and women, on their hair being, having hair. Gives me a little bit of probably room to do that, but I don't say you have lovely hair. I don't describe it in that way. I say and I remember doing this at with one of Marilee's classmates at her high school reunion. Um, African-American woman who had the braids, and it was really well put together. And I went up to her, I said, "You have extraordinary hair. It's really exceptional. Thank you."
Well, but that's
and
clearly you're referring to the way she's wearing it.
exactly,
Yeah.
not the fact that she has hair, but the fact of her choice about how she was going to wear it or present herself. So and that's kind of been my rule of thumb of complimenting people on their efforts rather than simply existence of or attributes. And that's how I've chosen to do it.
Right. And I think it's still reasonable to observe someone's talent or make an observation that, well, you're clearly very talented. Then you're I think it's an acknowledgement, and I think that's legitimate.
Well, I differentiate between, and this is a personal pet peeve, I think, that people often dismiss certain kinds of work as being merely talent.
Oh,
And
right.
that dismisses the amount of effort that goes into perfecting and exercising that talent in the creation of anything that somebody may have a natural inclination towards. It doesn't simply happen as a result of talent. It has to be applied. And I compliment the application of
Mhm.
their gifts. Everybody has certain gifts, but it's what they do with them that I think is worthy of a compliment. And certainly one of the things we're sort of talking around the edges of is, and we could have said, the art of complimenting someone without being a creep.
Right.
And and that's sort of one of the things that we've been alluding to here.
And I think in conjunction with that, I think that there's a certain amount of intent and source
Mm-hmm.
has to be considered to be, you know, paying someone a compliment should, first of all, it needs to be a sincere compliment. Otherwise it's just flattery.
Right.
Um, But if you're making a sincere compliment, even if it's some, I'm absolutely struck by the color of your eyes. The key there is to just leave it at that.
Yes.
Because that's an observation, and you can say that you appreciate it, and it has made an impression on you, and then absent yourself.
Yes. Because then the compliment is sincere because of how you don't follow it up.
Right.
If I said you had a nice body, would you hold it against me? It just
right. Yeah.
Dumbest pickup. If it's a pickup line, don't do it.
Yeah. It's not a compliment.
It's not a compliment. It's you being a jerk.
It's a solicitation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but again, and the source, if I don't know, maybe there will be an age at which it doesn't sound like a come on from a guy to to give a compliment to a woman, to say, well, you're very lovely. Thank you for coming to our party and whatever. But I think that there may be at some point, I'm old enough, and that may be sooner than I like to admit, that I can say that to someone much my junior,
yes,
without it seeming like I'm trying to make time.
I may be at that age now, being avuncular, seeing or grandfatherly or looking like Santa Claus, as one trick-or-treater thought a couple of years ago.
Got confused on the holiday?
No, it was trick-or-treat, and she looked at me as I bent down, a little girl, and bent down to give her candy. She said, "Are you Santa Claus?" And I looked at her, I said, "Don't tell anybody, but this is where I live at the North Pole. Have you been a good girl?" "Yes." I said, "Here, have some extra candy." And she looked at her mother, and her mother is smiling. So I keep thinking I should really get a red suit, not a Santa suit, but just like a red 3-piece suit for Halloween.
There you go.
Of course, we haven't had trick-or-treaters at our door
right
last year. So, one of the things that I am extremely careful about is being a teacher, is how I interact with students. And I focus on the work, and I encourage them in things they're doing. If some student athletes have a game, I say, "Hey, how'd you do?" "Great, good for you." Encourage them that way, but I don't comment on their appearance. And I was at a faculty meeting, not at the university I'm at, another one, where the faculty were complaining about young men wearing sagging pants, saying, "Yeah, when I'm going up the stairs, I don't want to see some students' underwear, and it's, well, what can we do about it?" And HR was running this meeting, and I said, I was recognized, and I said, "I've made a decision not to care." Is it a choice I would make in what I wear? Obviously not, but I don't care. I tell them to focus on the work. I say the work is what matters. I don't care. The only time I care about how you dress is if you're interviewing or presenting your work or a portfolio or a presentation, something, then it's standard business attire with one exception. Right. You have one thing you can do that's creative. For me, it was my hair. There's a young woman who had bright magenta hair. That was, there's one thing you can do, but it should be standard business wear. The rest of the time, I frankly don't give a shit. Saying in this faculty meeting, I said, look, if we tell them it's all about the work, focus on the work, and then start saying, but also these other things the rest of the time, then we are undercutting our own message.
Right.
And I refuse to do it. I won't do it. I have decided not to care. And then, of course, the other faculty are, oh, yeah, what he said. Right. Yeah. So, but again, it comes down to what has somebody decided to do, worked at doing, accomplished, done with their intention. And when you compliment the results of their work and their intention, rather than something with ulterior motives or something that they had nothing to do with.
Right. And if it's, as you say, if it's a sincere, if your goal is to simply express your opinion to another human being, which has its place, I suppose, if your object, if your intent is to actually make someone else's day a little better, giving that kind of compliment about what you have done, what you've chosen to do with your appearance, or you know, thanking someone for their service, a military person, something like that. If it see, and this may be a judgment call, that if it seems appropriate, if it doesn't seem like you would be creeping or trying to hit on, asking a question about the thing that you're just complimented can show a genuine interest and sincerity.
Yeah.
And that, but then again, it's, well, that's very interesting, and get out of there.
Yeah.
And then leave it alone. You're not there to monopolize somebody's day. If your purpose was to make them feel good because they made you feel good, or they brought a little light into your day, give them that, and then let them have it and walk away.
Make somebody's day. Why are you complimenting somebody? Is
Right.
it about you or is it about them? If it's about you, don't do it. If it's about them, do it in a way that's about them and
Right.
going to make their day better. Yeah.
And showing that little bit of extra interest
Yep.
can actually cement the compliment for somebody.
Sure. Yeah.
So
like
I was in Home Depot, I think it was, or one of the big box home stores, and there was a young lady, African American girl, standing at the end of her aisle, just sort of waiting for somebody to check out. And I wasn't checking out; I was walking by. But she was wearing this interesting kente cloth wrap headgear, and and just this bright splash of color in this industrial, setting. And I walked by and I said, this is great. And she said, oh, thank you. And I said, is it a tribal thing for you? And she went, yes, it is. My family. And she gave me a 30-second thing. I said, that looks terrific. And I just kept, I never really stopped walking. We had this whole conversation as I passed by her, never stopping and squaring up to her, just sort of walking by and having this, 2-sentence back and forth. And she smiled really big, and she just went on with her day. And so did I. And
it was clearly something she chose to wear as a personal expression. And so I think that makes a difference. And there was something else I was going to mention that I have completely forgotten. Let me have a bit of memory refresher.
Didn't work.
No.
Well, we've been at this for about a half an hour, and this is a fairly straightforward piece of advice we're giving.
Yes.
And I don't know that we're going to get deep into the philosophies of this beyond what we've said, that this isn't, make it about the person you're complimenting.
Right. Now, I do remember what I was going to say, and that years ago, some colleagues came to me and said, our boss's wife is having an art exhibit, and we want to know what we can say if it's really terrible. I said, well, So they were looking for how to make a non-committal statement that sounded like a compliment without really being one, because they didn't want to be honest if it was bad. Because in
Right.
that situation, some situations, yeah, you don't want to be honest. And
Well,
and
and
it's not dishonesty, it's not offering unwanted criticism in an inappropriate setting. And it's
right.
that balance of virtues between truthfulness, propriety,
Courtesy.
courtesy, kindness, generosity, all of those things. How are you balancing that? So it would have been completely inappropriate and possibly career risky if they said, wow, that really sucks, right?
Well, I think it also may be that they came to you because they didn't have the appropriately narrow education to give them the vocabulary to say something that shows that they had an opinion beyond ugh.
Yeah, I prefer to think of it as a broad education, and they didn't want to say, wow, that's interesting, because that's interesting is not a compliment. It's generally used in place of a compliment.
Right.
Because interesting isn't necessarily good or bad. I said, how about try this? It's evocative without being derivative.
Derivative.
And they
Excellent.
loved it, and they used it, and that was great. And the likelihood is that it was evocative of something.
Right.
It might have been derivative, but they
It might have
wouldn't
been
have,
entirely derivative.
but they wouldn't have known. They didn't know enough to know what it would have been derivative from. So,
Right.
and I do remember a mutual acquaintance of ours wrote a book, and we read passages of it to each other
Oh,
on a road
oh,
trip.
oh, yes, I remember the book you
Yes,
referred to clearly.
and this mutual acquaintance of ours at one point asked me after sometime later what I thought, and I said, "It is everything I expected it to be and more." And he said that our mutual acquaintance was very pleased at this. Well, I haven't said this to him, but I would. It's absolutely one of the worst things I have ever read. But I
Well, it was
didn't
a
want to say it to him because he put a lot of effort into it. And I was making a snide comment that he simply didn't realize because he took it as a compliment. And shame on me, that was it was perhaps unkind of me, except his reaction, he thought it was kind. And so I was making a joke at his expense, and I apologize for that, although I haven't apologized to him, and I should. But
well, we
it
haven't
was
seen
also
you yet.
funny
Yeah.
as hell what I said. So,
Well, considering that the book was a vanity publication,
yeah.
and boy was it vain.
Pornographic sword and sorcery, as I recall. So,
Well, erotic sword and sorcery with vampires and a little light bondage, as I recall, and it was all of this guy's fantasies poured out onto a page and
yeah,
presented to the public for their
it
review.
was everything I expected it to be, and more.
Yeah.
But it did say to me that he'd put work into it, and he was really proud of it, and he should be. I know now how much effort it is to write a fucking book.
Yeah.
It's a lot of effort. Even if it's a vanity publication, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of diligence that goes into it. It must have taken him at least half an hour.
Well,
there I go again. See,
he certainly didn't spend a lot of time editing.
Well, it does remind me of an old wine commercial with Sir John Gielgud, as he's a butler or server, something, walking through an art gallery, and he has wine on a tray, as I recall it. He's walking through, and the artist, who is appropriately dressed all in black and gaunt, saying, would you believe this only took me 30 minutes? And as Gielgud's walking by, he said, yes, I would. And he kept walking. And okay, I admire a witticism, and I admire snark when it's well done. But I don't want to hurt people's feelings unintentionally, right? I don't want to offend somebody unintentionally.
Right.
And it felt, as you know, I thought about it, I think I was putting one over on him, and that, shame on me for doing that. Because I would have said, or could have chosen to say, I can see the effort and the care and the thought that went into this, and I really appreciate this. And I hope you do it again. I hope you write another one. I hope you keep going.
And I hope I never have to read the
second. Hey, it couldn't have gotten worse. So, but
well, there have been times when, and you and I both been in this situation. We have lots of friends who do brewing and vintning, and
yes,
having some concoction pressed upon you at a social function, and well, sometimes I'll just refuse outright to drink. My rule is, if you can't tell me what the ingredients are, I'm not going to drink it. That's
just try it. No,
that just seems like common sense to me.
Yeah.
If you're not going to tell me what's in it, why would I drink it? So, but if I take a taste of it and I don't like it, I've come to the place where it doesn't mean it's bad because I don't like it, but I respond usually with, well, I've not had anything like it, quite like it before, and I don't think it's to my palate.
Exactly.
But thank you.
Because you're describing your reaction, you're not characterizing the thing and their effort in a negative way. You're saying, it's not to my taste. Doesn't mean it's not to everybody's taste. I do have a list of the most vile things I've ever had to drink, but and have said, well, I didn't in all occasions because it was a social occasion. It's a different story anyway. But
yeah, I've certainly had some anti-personnel drinks pushed on me that I did not hesitate to tell them it was awful and don't ever come at me with that again.
Yeah, but you know, there's a certain rapport that friends can have.
Oh, yes, yes.
And one of the challenges we've seen is when a group of peers, and I mean that both in all senses of the word, are standing around and there's banter with each other, manly banter.
Let's not get into locker room talk now.
Not locker room talk, but there's some, you know, there's stuff going around, and it can be borderline insulting, but you know, it's meant in,
well, it's insults, usually insults that have been shared over and over again so long and so many times that they're not insults anymore. They're just recognition of each other's personalities.
Right. And but when people outside that group see it, they may think that that's an appropriate way to interact with other people. And
they weigh in the group.
And it's not. You have to be in before you can interact in that way. But we're veering off into the tendrils of the central topic that are reaching out into like a creeping fungus, which is often the diagram of our conversations.
It is.
Because we're both fungi.
Oh, well, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Well, that may not be the greatest place to end, but I can see how we can go on.
It's probably time we did, though.
Yes, yes. So so good. That was what do you think we should do coming up? What other art of things could we do? If
Well,
you have
that's
an
a good
idea,
question. What do you think other things we should do, and what topics do you think we should cover? Please like, subscribe, suggest, email us, send fan mails, send bottles of whiskey, quality stuff, you know, and let us know.
yeah, we are susceptible to bribes. So we'll talk about anything you want, you know, if the price is right. So
They're not bribes, they're compliments. See,
okay.
artfully
Right.
done compliments. So,
Okay. So we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
yep.
And until that time, be thou
A good night.
and true.